The hardest decision you'll ever make may not be leaving someone who hurt you. It may be staying gone after you've already walked away. Why does freedom sometimes feel more painful than the prison you escaped? Because the greatest battles are not fought against another person. They are fought inside the heart that is learning to choose peace over familiar pain. There is a moment that changes everything. It is not the argument that finally convinces you something is wrong. It is not the betrayal, the disappointment, or even the tears. It is the quiet realization that no matter how much love, patience, understanding, or sacrifice you continue to give, the relationship keeps demanding more while giving you less. You begin to recognize a painful pattern. Every attempt to fix the situation leaves you feeling more exhausted. Every conversation meant to bring clarity creates more confusion. Every promise that things will change slowly begins to sound like an echo rather than a reality. Eventually, a difficult truth becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes the healthiest choice is not trying harder. Sometimes it is choosing to walk away. Yet leaving is rarely the end of the struggle. In many cases, it is only the beginning. People often imagine that once they create distance from an emotionally unhealthy relationship, relief will arrive immediately. Instead, they are surprised by grief, anxiety, loneliness, guilt, and even moments of intense self-doubt. They begin questioning whether they made the right decision. They remember the good moments while forgetting the painful patterns that led them to leave. The mind has a remarkable ability to romanticize familiarity, even when that familiarity caused deep emotional exhaustion. This is why the first days of separation often feel so confusing. You are not only letting go of another person, you are letting go of the version of life your heart had hoped would one day become real. Many people misunderstand this emotional pain. They assume that because they miss the relationship, they must have made a mistake. But missing someone does not automatically mean they were good for you. Human beings naturally become attached to routines, even unhealthy ones. The brain often prefers what is familiar over what is unknown because familiarity creates the illusion of safety. That is why breaking away from an emotionally draining situation can feel frightening. Your emotions are adjusting to change, while your mind is still learning that peace may initially feel unfamiliar. Healing is uncomfortable because it asks you to release what you have known in order to make room for something healthier. Think about how emotional burnout develops. It rarely happens overnight. It is built through countless small moments of ignoring your own needs to preserve someone else's comfort. You remain silent when something hurts because you fear conflict. You excuse behavior that repeatedly damages your confidence because you hope understanding will eventually create change. You sacrifice your peace to keep the relationship together, believing that one more effort, one more conversation, or one more chance will finally make everything different. But every compromise slowly pulls you further away from yourself. One day you realize you have become an expert at protecting someone else's feelings while completely neglecting your own. Walking away interrupts that pattern, but it also exposes how much of your identity became tied to trying to save the relationship. Suddenly, there is empty space where constant worry once existed. There are quiet evenings where emotional chaos once lived. There is no longer a daily struggle to predict another person's mood or adjust your behavior to avoid conflict. At first, this silence can feel uncomfortable because you spent so long surviving that you forgot what genuine peace sounds like. Your nervous system needs time to learn that calm is not something to fear. It is something to welcome. This is why patience becomes essential. Healing does not move in a straight line. Some mornings you will feel stronger than ever before. Other days, memories will return unexpectedly, and your confidence may seem to disappear. Do not mistake these moments for failure. Recovery is not measured by never feeling pain again. It is measured by refusing to let pain convince you to return to what repeatedly wounded you. Every day you choose your peace over familiar suffering. You strengthen the person you are becoming. There is also a deeper lesson hidden within this season. Walking away teaches you that your well-being is not selfish. Protecting your emotional health is not an act of betrayal. Healthy boundaries are not walls built to keep love out. They are foundations that protect your dignity, your clarity, and your future. The courage to leave an unhealthy dynamic is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of rebuilding a life where your value is no longer determined by how much you are willing to endure. One day, you will look back and realize that the pain you felt after walking away was never proof that you chose the wrong path. It was simply the cost of breaking free from habits that no longer served your life. That temporary discomfort becomes the bridge leading toward confidence, emotional stability, and relationships built on mutual respect rather than constant sacrifice. The first step toward lasting peace is accepting that leaving may hurt, but staying where your spirit is continually diminished hurts far more. Silence has a strange power. At first, it feels empty, almost unbearable. After walking away from an emotionally unhealthy relationship, many people expect to feel immediate relief. Instead, they find themselves sitting in quiet rooms with racing thoughts, wondering why freedom feels so unfamiliar. The phone no longer fills with emotional conversations. The constant tension disappears. The endless cycle of conflict finally comes to an end. Yet instead of peace, there is an unsettling emptiness. Many mistake this feeling for proof that they should return. In reality, it is often the first sign that healing has finally begun. For a long time, your mind became accustomed to emotional chaos. Every day required you to analyze another conversation, anticipate another reaction, or wonder how to avoid the next conflict. Your nervous system slowly adapted to living in a constant state of alertness. Over time, stress became normal. Anxiety became familiar. Emotional exhaustion became part of your daily routine. When that cycle suddenly stops, your mind does not immediately recognize peace. It recognizes change, and change, even when it leads to something better, often feels uncomfortable before it feels liberating. This is why silence becomes such an important teacher. Without constant emotional noise, you finally begin hearing your own thoughts again. Questions that were buried beneath endless conflict begin to rise to the surface. What do I truly enjoy? What kind of life do I want? Why did I ignore my own needs for so long? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs that your identity is beginning to return. For too long, your attention revolved around managing someone else's emotions, solving someone else's problems, or preserving a relationship that slowly consumed your peace. Now, for the first time in a long while, your energy can be invested in understanding yourself. Healing, however, is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. It happens the first morning you wake up without checking your phone in fear. It happens when you laugh without feeling guilty. It happens when you spend an evening reading, exercising, praying, creating, or simply enjoying a peaceful moment without emotional tension hanging over you. These small victories may appear insignificant, but together they rebuild something that was slowly disappearing: your confidence. Every peaceful day reminds your mind that safety no longer depends on pleasing someone else. It depends on remaining true to yourself. There will also be moments when memories return unexpectedly. Your mind may replay the good times while conveniently ignoring the repeated disappointments that came with them. Nostalgia has a way of editing reality. It often removes the pain while preserving only the comfort of familiarity. During these moments, remind yourself why you chose distance in the first place. Do not judge the relationship by its happiest memories. Judge it by its consistent patterns. A few beautiful moments cannot erase months or years of emotional exhaustion. Real healing requires honesty, not selective memory. As your heart begins recovering, something remarkable changes. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention. The need for constant reassurance slowly fades. Anxiety loses its grip because you are no longer waiting for the next emotional storm. Your thoughts become clearer. Your decisions become wiser. Healthy boundaries no longer feel like punishment. They become acts of self-respect. You begin discovering interests you neglected, dreams you postponed, and strengths you never realized you possessed because so much of your energy had been spent surviving instead of growing. The greatest mistake you can make during this season is believing that healing means never feeling pain again. Healing means the pain no longer controls your decisions. Some days will still be difficult. Certain memories may still bring sadness. But each time you choose your peace instead of returning to what repeatedly wounded you, you become stronger than you were the day before. That quiet discipline transforms temporary suffering into lasting resilience. One day, you will realize that the silence you once feared became the place where your confidence was rebuilt. The empty space left behind was never meant to remain empty forever. It was creating room for peace, clarity, healthier relationships, and a stronger version of yourself. What once felt like loneliness slowly becomes freedom because you no longer confuse emotional chaos with love. The silence after walking away is not your punishment. It is the place where your healing quietly begins, and your true self finally has room to breathe. The most difficult battle after choosing distance is rarely the absence of the other person. It is the battle taking place inside your own mind. There will be days when loneliness whispers that going back would be easier than continuing forward. Memories will suddenly replay the happiest moments while quietly hiding the countless times you felt unheard, emotionally exhausted, or uncertain about your own worth. This is how emotional habits work. The mind naturally clings to familiarity, even when that familiarity repeatedly caused pain. It mistakes what is known for what is safe. That is why the urge to return can feel so powerful, even when you know deep down why you chose to leave. Guilt often joins this struggle. You begin wondering if you expected too much, if you should have been more patient, or if one more conversation could have changed everything. These questions are natural because compassionate people often assume responsibility for problems they did not create alone. But healing requires honesty. A healthy relationship should not demand that one person constantly sacrifices their peace while the other remains unwilling or unable to change. Looking back with compassion is healthy. Rewriting history to ignore repeated patterns is not. Another challenge is the fear of starting over. The future can seem uncertain, while the past feels familiar. In moments of weakness, familiarity can appear more attractive than freedom. Yet remember why you walked away. You were not searching for temporary comfort. You were searching for peace, emotional stability, and the chance to become yourself again. Returning simply because the unknown feels uncomfortable often leads back to the same painful cycle you worked so hard to leave behind. This is where discipline becomes more important than emotion. Feelings change from one day to the next, but your values can remain steady. Every time you choose to protect your emotional well, being instead of acting on temporary loneliness. You strengthen your confidence. Every day you invest in your own growth through healthy routines, meaningful goals, supportive relationships, or quiet reflection. You remind yourself that your future deserves more than repeated pain. Recovery is not about pretending you never cared. It is about caring enough about yourself to stop accepting what continually diminished your peace. One day, the urge to go back will no longer control your thoughts. The memories will still exist, but they will no longer decide your future. Instead, they will become reminders of how far you have come and why choosing yourself was one of the bravest decisions you ever made. The hardest victory is not walking away once. It is choosing your peace every day until looking back no longer feels necessary. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you begin waiting for one final conversation, one final explanation, one final apology that will suddenly make everything make sense. You tell yourself that if the other person would simply admit what happened, accept responsibility, or finally recognize your pain, then your heart could move on. It feels reasonable. It feels fair. But the painful truth is that your healing cannot depend on another person's willingness or ability to give you the closure you deserve. The longer your peace depends on someone else's response, the longer your freedom remains outside your control. Many people stay emotionally trapped because they confuse closure with agreement. They believe they cannot move forward until the other person understands exactly how much damage was done. They replay old conversations in their minds, imagining different endings or searching for the perfect words that might finally change the outcome. But some people will never see the relationship the way you do. Others may remember events differently, avoid difficult conversations, or simply be unable to provide the understanding you hope for. Waiting for a response that may never come only extends your emotional suffering. Every day spent chasing answers from the past is a day stolen from building your future. This does not mean your pain was imaginary or unimportant. Your experiences matter, even if someone else never acknowledges them. Healing begins the moment you stop asking another person to validate what your own heart already knows. You do not need permission to recognize that something repeatedly damaged your peace. You do not need another person's agreement before deciding that your emotional well-being deserves protection. Acceptance is not pretending everything was acceptable. Acceptance is recognizing reality without allowing it to define the rest of your life. There is incredible freedom in releasing the need for the perfect ending. Instead of waiting for someone else to change, you begin changing the way you respond. You stop chasing explanations that only create more confusion. You stop reopening wounds that were slowly beginning to heal. Your energy shifts from looking backward to investing in the person you are becoming. That is where real recovery begins, not when the past is rewritten, but when it no longer controls your future. One day, you will realize that closure was never hidden inside another conversation. It was quietly growing every time you chose peace over another argument, self-respect over another disappointment, and healing over another attempt to make someone understand what they refused or were unable to see. The strongest form of closure is not hearing the words you wanted to hear. It is reaching a place where you no longer need them to move forward. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to complete your healing is the moment your life truly begins to belong to you again. After spending so much time trying to preserve an emotionally draining relationship, many people eventually discover something deeply unsettling. They no longer know who they are. Somewhere between avoiding conflict, constantly explaining themselves, sacrificing their own needs, and trying to keep the relationship together, they slowly drifted away from the person they once were. Their dreams were postponed, Their confidence became fragile. Their routines disappeared. Even the simple things that once brought them joy were quietly abandoned. This is why healing is not only about recovering from emotional pain. It is also about rediscovering the identity that was buried beneath years of survival. The first step in rebuilding yourself is accepting that your life deserves to revolve around your values again. For too long, your daily decisions may have been shaped by another person's moods, reactions, or expectations. Every choice became an attempt to avoid conflict instead of pursue growth. But now you have an opportunity that once seemed impossible. You can ask yourself questions you may not have considered for years. What inspires me? What kind of person do I want to become? What habits make me feel stronger instead of smaller? These questions shift your attention away from the past and toward the future you are capable of creating. Rebuilding your identity does not happen through dramatic moments. It happens through quiet, consistent actions repeated every day. You begin waking up with purpose instead of fear. You reconnect with books, hobbies, exercise, meaningful work, faith, creativity, or friendships that remind you of your own strength. Every healthy decision becomes evidence that your future no longer has to resemble your past. Little by little, your confidence stops depending on someone else's opinion because it is being built through promises you keep to yourself. Self-respect grows every time your actions reflect your values rather than your fears. There will be moments when doubt returns. You may question whether you are making progress quickly enough or whether the old version of your life was somehow easier. During those moments, remember that growth often feels unfamiliar before it feels rewarding. The person you are becoming cannot emerge if you keep trying to return to the person you had to be just to survive. Give yourself permission to grow without constantly comparing your present to your past. As your identity becomes stronger, your relationships begin changing as well. You no longer seek people who require endless sacrifice to stay. You naturally move toward those who respect your boundaries, celebrate your growth, and bring calm rather than confusion into your life. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can endure for someone else and begin measuring it by how faithfully you honor your own values. That quiet transformation becomes the foundation for healthier relationships, wiser decisions, and a far more peaceful future. Never forget that the most important relationship you rebuild is the one you have with yourself. When you trust your own judgment again, protect your own peace, and invest in your own growth, you become someone who no longer needs to lose themselves in order to keep someone else. The day you begin rebuilding yourself is the day your past finally loses the power to define your future. After everything you have endured, it becomes tempting to measure victory by someone else's reaction. You imagine the day they finally realize what they lost. You wonder if they think about you, regret their choices, or notice that you are no longer there. At first, these thoughts seem harmless. They feel like the final chapter your heart has been waiting to read. But the greatest freedom does not arrive when another person regrets hurting you. It arrives when their opinion no longer determines your peace. That is the moment your life truly becomes your own again. Many people remain emotionally connected long after they have physically walked away because they continue living through the other person's imagined perspective. They hope success will make them jealous. They hope silence will make them curious. They hope happiness will make them regret everything. But as long as your happiness depends on provoking a reaction, your attention is still tied to the past. Your future deserves better than becoming a performance for someone who no longer deserves control over your emotional world. True victory is much quieter than people expect. It happens when you wake up one morning and realize They were not the first thought on your mind. It happens when you laugh without remembering the pain that once followed every joyful moment. It happens when you make decisions based on your own values instead of wondering how someone else would respond. Healing reaches its highest point when your energy is no longer spent looking backward, but fully invested in the life unfolding before you. By now, you have learned that walking away, embracing silence, resisting the urge to return, releasing the need for closure, and rebuilding your identity were never separate lessons. They were all preparing you for this final transformation. Each difficult step strengthened your emotional resilience. Each healthy boundary restored a piece of your confidence. Each day of choosing peace over familiar pain quietly rebuilt the person you thought you had lost. What once felt like the end of your world slowly became the beginning of a stronger one. As your confidence grows, your standards change. You no longer mistake inconsistency for passion or emotional chaos for love. You become more patient, more discerning, and more protective of your peace. Relationships are no longer chosen out of fear of being alone, but from a place of self-respect and emotional stability. The life you are building now is not centered around proving your worth to anyone. It is centered around honoring the worth you finally recognize within yourself. One day, you may hear their name again, see an old photograph, or remember a chapter of your past. The difference is that your heart will no longer respond with longing. It will respond with gratitude, not because the experience was easy, but because it taught you the value of healthy boundaries, emotional strength, and self-respect. You will understand that your greatest achievement was never escaping an unhealthy relationship. It was becoming someone who would never again abandon themselves to keep one. Remember this above all else. Your future is too valuable to remain chained to a past that continually asked you to sacrifice your peace. The greatest revenge is not making someone miss you. The greatest victory is creating a life so grounded in purpose, confidence, and inner peace that you no longer need anyone else's regret to validate your decision. Your greatest victory is not that someone finally sees your worth. It is that you finally do, and you never abandon it again.